The tale of two Nazanines is about rape, death row, and a fight for survival. Two women called Nazanin, one in Iran, the other in Canada. Their story made special by the Nazanin who wrote it, Nazanin Afshin-Jam, no ordinary author, and our guest this week. So I guess there are any number of routes I could go down with you. I mean, the author, Tale of Two Nazanines, now out. The activist, stop executions, child executions. Beauty queen, singer, wife of a cabinet minister, and the list keeps on. But I chose to start instead I'm trying to focus on what I think is a core of you being a Canadian, and that's your heritage. Born in Iran, left as an infant. But that heritage has never left you.
No.
Why is it important to you?
I think when you're born in a country, everything that you learn from your parents, from that culture, and the stories of your ancestors, it all becomes a part of you. The food you eat, all this becomes instilled with you, and especially values. In my family values are very important. In fact, among a lot of the Iranian community, a tight-knit family defines us almost. You know, when we make a decision, we involve the family, and we have a long and rich history.
Now, you left Iran at a critical point. I mean, you were in your parents' arms when you left at 1 year, went to Spain for a year, and then came to Canada. But you left during '79, during the revolution that the Shah of Iran left, and the Ayatollah Khomeini came back in. But what you didn't seem to know until a few years later, quite a few years later, is what happened to your father right then. Share that with us.
Yep. Well, when the revolution happened, people were fleeing the country. Ayatollah Khomeini came to power and brought really repressive rule. And I didn't know anything about this at the time. It wasn't until I was 7 or 8 years old when I saw, or at least I took notice of the scars on my father's back. And I started asking questions. And I had heard rumors from other friends that my father had been jailed and tortured. And I took offense to this because as a child, you only associate those who go to jail as somebody who's done something bad. As a Canadian, you know, only bad people go to jail. In Iran, you might go to jail because you're a prisoner of conscience, political prisoner, because you practice a certain faith, because you've converted from a certain religion, or because you're homosexual. So these had a lot of different connotations, meanings at the time. I didn't realize all that. So when I was hearing these things, my father did not go to jail. And then I questioned further my father, and finally he backed down and started telling me, because I could tell that there was a secret in the family, and you know, their eyes would shift to one another when some of these stories would come up. So I wanted to know what happened, and when I was young, he told me in a way that a little girl could understand. It wasn't until years later, when I was a teen or in my 20s, that he really got into the details, and I could really understand and absorb what he was telling me.
And that story was one of resistance. He was resisting the new regime.
Well, he was not even a really political man. He was the general manager of the Sheraton Hotel at the time, and there was new Islamic rules which he didn't really even know what they were. Nobody really knew what these rules entailed. He still kept up the Shah's painting in the hotel. That was a no-no. He was allowing mingling between men and women, dancing and alcohol, and these, again, were forbidden. So one day the Revolutionary Guards burst in and imprisoned him and tortured him, and they wanted to execute him, but thankfully through fate, or whatever you want to call it, he managed to get temporarily released, and then we escaped to Spain.
So what does that story mean to you now?
I think subconsciously it's affected me throughout my life in terms of questioning why somebody that's quote-unquote innocent could have faced so much suffering. And it just had me question why certain things, why certain injustices take place. And I guess that's the fire that fuels me now to want to make a difference and try to make change.
Especially in the issue of child executions in Iran and in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, that's what your book is about in The Tale of Two Nazanines,
Mm-hmm.
and the story of a young woman who had the same name as you, who suddenly out of the blue emailed you because she'd seen your success on the world stage.
It was even a stranger that emailed me the first time. He just had read the story of the other Nazanin, just a very short clip on an online news site, and he Googled her name and by accident came on my website because I got the most hits for that name, and then ended up telling me a little bit about her story, but nobody really knew beyond that. And then I took it upon myself to learn more about her, and through the process I learned that there's 160 other children on death row, and that her case is not a single case. And I also in the process learned about the legal discrimination that women face, the abuse that children face also on a daily basis, and other people. And again, through this book, we're just showcasing one life. So it guides you through her life and the pains that she experienced growing up in a very discriminatory and traditional family, but then, of course, her life in prison and the fact that she was being, constantly fed pills to keep sedated, being put into solitary confinement, being tortured with electrical chains, and the list goes on. I mean, there's just so much abuse.
And all this for the crime of resisting when she was raped. She struck back and was sentenced to hang.
Mm-hmm. She wasn't tried as a victim, or she wasn't treated as a victim of attempted rape. She was tried as a first-rate criminal and sentenced to hang.
I don't want to give away the whole story, her story in the book, but it is interesting to know that you were successful in your campaign to get her freed, but you've lost track of her since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it was certainly not my work alone that had her freed. There was hundreds of thousands of people across the world who campaigned for her, and
but
the
some
international.
in part inspired by the campaign that you started.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
She was freed, and yes, it is a mystery. We don't know where she is. I was keeping very close contact with her up until 2010, when all of a sudden I had no more contact at all. And for the last couple of years, I've been trying to search for her and getting people in Iran to look for her, especially in the Kurdish area, because she went back to Kurdistan. And nobody has any leads. Some of the top Kurdish political parties that pretty much know the ongoings of what's taking place in the region and what happens at the family level, they don't even have contacts with other of her family members.
Do you fear for the worst?
I hope for the best. I hope that she's married somebody and went off and just has a quiet, private life. But the worst fears that maybe the regime harassed her into staying silent, and her family, or that the family of the man who died in terms of the attack that took place, that they took revenge and took it upon themselves to seek justice, because they were quite violent in the courtroom, the last trial.
Coming up, life as a defense minister's wife.
I speak about Iran with Peter on a daily basis, and he knows where I stand, and he's of the same view as me.
More with Nazanin Afshin-Jam right after this.
Let's talk about your quiet, private life for a moment. And in a way, as it relates to this issue of your past and your interest in what happens to your old country in Iran. The focus of the world is often on Iran, certainly has been much of the past year. Where are you on that issue in terms of Iran's ambitions to have nuclear capability? Does that bother you?
Well, what bothers me is that most of the focus on Iran is on the nuclear question, where the focus should be on human rights. Because I believe if Iran was under a democratic system and there had leaders in power, stable leaders that actually represented the voices and the wishes of the people, then we wouldn't be questioning whether Iran should have nuclear capabilities in the first place.
You really believe that?
Yeah, I believe so, because Iranian people are freedom-loving, democratic at heart, and if Iran was under this stable democratic country with transparency and wouldn't have corrupt leaders at the helm, fanatical ones, then we wouldn't be questioning it, just like France or the United States having nuclear capabilities.
Do you think Israel would find it acceptable for Iran, even under a democratic government?
I think they would, because, I mean, if you go back in history, under the Shah's time, Iran and Israel were, I mean, I wouldn't call them best friends, but they were really close. And if they trusted the leaders, then I don't think it would be a problem.
I know you've had the opportunity to discuss the issue with Israel's defense minister, Ehud Barak. Did you go that far with him? In terms
I did. I said it straight up to him that military intervention would be the worst scenario. It would be the last solution that anybody should think of, and that it would have repercussions. I mean, a lot of Iranian people, what I'm told, is that they would side with the regime just because they hate this regime, but they would feel like they'd have to side with this regime and rally around the flag to protect their sovereignty. And all the advancements that human rights defenders have made thus far in trying to bring this country to a level or standing that honors rights and freedoms, it would be all wiped away.
And how did he respond to that?
He listened carefully. In fact, I mean, it was a big table of 30 people.
We were sitting face to face. These were other defense ministers. You were there along with your husband.
I was there with my husband. That was why I was even attending this dinner. And most of the focus of that dinner was on this question. He was very interested to know what the Iranian people think on this question and how they would react.
Do you know how they think on this question?
Well, I know based on the emails I get, based on the research I do, based on the newspapers I read, they just want freedom and democracy.
You must be conflicted, though, in terms of the pressure that's being put, including by the Canadian government, including by the cabinet that your husband is a part of, in trying to prevent Iran from going too far down this nuclear road, and fears, very evident fears on the part of certainly the Prime Minister, that they want to go the full mile and have nuclear weapons. You must be conflicted over the means to which to try and prevent that, which include, in some cases, trying to blockade Iran from certain trade situations, and that possibility of a strike. So how do you handle that?
Well, I'm quite comfortable at this stage of where the government's going, just because I know that whereas they have not taken military intervention off the table, that could just be used as a tool, like a saber-rattling tool, to instill fear on the regime. I know that would be the last resort, and they're thinking of all the other methods they should do in advance of such a catastrophic event. They, of course, believe in diplomatic means and targeted sanctions to cripple the Revolutionary Guard and asset freezes on also people that are part of the Revolutionary Guard. They're thinking of all the methods, and they have quite a number of debates and meetings on this issue. In fact, just 2 days ago, there was a stand-up meeting, debate in Parliament on human rights in Iran, and there's always committees on the whole nuclear question as well. So I don't think they're trigger happy or that they want to instigate something. Nobody wants war. Nobody wants war.
The conversation you had with Ehud Barak, have you had the same conversation with Peter MacKay?
Of course I have. I speak about Iran with Peter on a daily basis, and he knows where I stand, and he's of the same view as me. He's against war, and he wants to show his support for the freedom-loving people of Iran and show that Canada stands in solidarity with the people and is very much against the regime in power.
How are you finding life married to a cabinet minister? One who is often in the crosshairs of the opposition, challenged on everything from his policies to his habits of how he flies around. How is that? How is life like that?
Well, married life in general is great. If I was married to, a doctor or a lawyer or a shoe salesman, it would be the same. I see him as the person he is, and that's wonderful. There are challenges, of course, as you just mentioned. He's been in the media quite a bit lately, and what's difficult about being married to a cabinet minister is seeing headlines that don't match the reality or do not match the person that he is. Peter is very wonderful, honest, hardworking man who really, puts all his energy and time into supporting the troops and supporting, the people in his constituency and just wanting to advance Canada to the next level. And so when I see these headlines that attack him in a way, I feel it's really unfair, and a lot of the media reports are torqued in a way that do not represent the reality. And I've seen it, with my own eyes of a situation taking place and then seeing it represented differently in the media.
It's always our fault, right? It's always the media's fault.
It's not the media's fault, but I think, in a way, journalists might be getting lazier than they used to be, where one person will put out one article and then they'll copy that report. They don't do their due diligence, they don't fact check, and they don't necessarily always present another side. I mean, when I started studying broadcast journalism, one of the things you're taught is to not be biased. I mean, there's always, of course, a little bit of bias, but you try to present the facts. And, if you take that helicopter issue, for example, that's just one example of how I think it was just almost the opposite of really what happened.
Let me ask you one question on the F-35, and it's got nothing to do with the policy or the cost of it. It's when we see the pictures of your husband climbing into the cockpit of an F-35, you must get a chuckle. I mean, you're actually a pilot. You know what all those things are. Maybe not on an F-35, but generally you know what's there. And then you see your husband, who's not a pilot, stepping in one. That must be fun, a fun conversation.
It's fun just because, being an past air cadet and having seen old aircraft and now seeing the capabilities of some of these jets today, it's exciting just on the technical side of things. So I know Peter has flown in a snowbird before, and I'm very jealous about that. So just, of course, it's nice that he gets to be so close to the real thing.
Well, I'm sure he can arrange a ride for you in a Tudor jet, because they're taking people up all the time in those.
I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I don't think that's in the cards. I don't see it in the crystal ball.
When we come back,
if you wanted to, and I assume you would want to someday, could you go back to Iran?
the answer from Nazanin Afshin-Jam right after this.
Let me ask you what you hope to achieve with this book, The Tale of Two Nazanines. What do you want readers to come away from that book with?
I'd really like people to leave this book feeling inspired and knowing that they can actually make change and that one person really can make a difference. I want them to understand the power of the individual and know that if they're dedicated and passionate about a cause and they work hard on it, that they can make significant changes and maybe even save a human life. On the other side, I just want people to understand better the reality for those in Iran that are experiencing abuse, the human rights issues that are taking place there. And, 50% of my royalties from the book will be going to anti-violence against women and children initiatives. So through, supporting the book, they'll also be supporting some of the actual action, cause to action.
If you wanted to, and I assume you would want to someday, could you go back to Iran?
At this point, no, but I am very hopeful about the situation in Iran.
And no now, why? Why would you not be able to go back?
Well, I've received threatening messages, and I would probably be imprisoned as soon as I walked off the airplane in Iran.
Because of the campaigns that you've been involved in?
And being outspoken against this regime. They know my stance, and I've been, on various radio, television reports and magazines speaking against this regime and offering solutions and talking to government officials on how we can make change. So, not right now, but I think that in the future I will. I will step on that soil for the first time.
And what will that mean to you when you do?
It'll be incredible. It'll be one of my dreams come true. My grandmother last year passed away, and I wasn't able to fly to Iran to see her when she was sick in the hospital bed. And I think I would just like to go and visit the mausoleum where she's buried and some of my ancestors, and to really discover the country, because I've only seen it in pictures and I've only read it in words, but I want to experience it for myself.
Well, good luck with that dream, and good luck with the book.
Thank you.
Thank you.